And maybe last one or two questions to wrap up. So, what advice do you have? Maybe we can start with new leaders who are in that transition process. What advice do you have for them to make that first 90 days as successful as possible? And then we can talk about more seasoned leaders.
Yeah. So understand the challenges. Be as clear as you possibly can about the challenges. Be clear as possible as you can about how you're going to create value and what you're there to do. Plan your learning process. Plan the process of engaging with key stakeholders early on. Be really thoughtful about how you're going to arrive in the new organization and what the messaging is that you want to send. Because a lot of what you do early on is about signaling and symbolism. So be really thoughtful about that, because those early actions can send very powerful messages, whether you intend them to or not. I mean, that would be some big ones. Be careful. I mean, back to that pressure you can feel, the action imperative that I described. Be really thoughtful about the balance between learning and connecting and deciding and acting. Making sure you're trying to strike the right balance between those two things.
And what about for more seasoned leaders who, it's not the first 90 days of a new role, but maybe they're going through their own transitions? Anything they should focus on or do?
So when you say they're going through their own transitions, how do you mean?
Well, I mean, maybe they're not going through a new leader transition. They're going through some other kind of transition, or would the advice be the same?
It would be similar, right? I mean, the reason I'm hesitating is it depends a lot on the transition you're talking about, right? And so, if I end up advising folks a lot on restructuring and reshaping their leadership teams, it's got similar ideas embedded in it, but you do it a little bit differently, right? Likewise, if you're sort of launching a big organizational transformation, there's a logic how you set up to begin the process and launch it well. So that logic of getting off to a good start, right, sort of applies across a lot of things. But then it gets pretty, nuanced depending on exactly what you're doing. There are a couple, though, that I would point you to, and I know this is not what you were expecting, but I'm going to do it to you anyway. I have a colleague at IMD who runs a wonderful program for basically people that have kind of hit the plateau of their careers. And they're probably not going to go to the very pinnacle, but they've still got 10, 15 years of work life. And how do you kind of recharge yourself, revitalize yourself, think about that next era when you've sort of taken advancement out of the equation? That's a big transition. Retiring, right? Oh my God, it's hugely important, right? Now, you're a long way away from that, but I can tell you that people that have devoted their lives to running companies and strongly, kind of base their identities in doing that, can go through like remarkably difficult times when they transition out into what life looks like beyond that. And actually some of the coaching I do is with people that are going through that. How do you sort of reimagine yourself, beyond the C-suite?
What happens if the transition does not go well? So the first 90 days do not go well. Can you rebound, or is it just game over for you?
Panic and run away screaming is my basic answer. No, so that's I think there's a couple of different answers to that, Jake. And one is transitions take longer than 90 days, right? So if you haven't got where you want to, I say if it's day 91 and you haven't done everything you feel like you need to do, don't panic, right? The game is by no means over. I think recovery, your ability to recover depends on how much damage you've done, which then is a very important reason to get that feedback from like that transition progress assessment early, because there's no question you hit a threshold and it's over. And I've occasionally been asked to do rescue missions with people, right? Executive who's got themselves into pretty deep trouble, can you help us get them out? And I hate that because it runs against everything I think about getting off to good starts. But sometimes because it's an important client, I end up doing that work. If it's gone beyond a certain point, right, where people have begun to see you through the gray cloud, right, and have formed these impressions that have hardened around you and are seeing every action that you take through the lens of those negative perceptions, it's pretty much over at that point.